Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode, we welcome Joshua Millican to the podcast to talk about his latest novel, or say novella, over at Shortwave Publishing, part of the Killer VHS series, Teleportasm. And Josh has been a writer for a while here. He's been working as a journalist for Dread Central for a while there. He was the editor-in-chief for a couple of years. He also had a talk show on there called Chronic Horror, which explored the intersection between horror movie fandom and cannabis culture, which is pretty cool. You can check that out. I believe it's free online, so you can check that out there. But yeah, Joshua is also an author, and so he's come up with a couple of books, Deeper Than Hell, Septum, and a couple other novelizations of old horror movies. But this latest Teleportasm dropped anywhere. Books are available, but check out shortwavepublishing.com to get this book and a cool gift box. It looks like a VHS and all that stuff. So check out shortwavepublishing.com. But this is Joshua Millican talking Teleportasm of the Killer VHS series over there at Shortwave Publishing, right here on the Capes and Tights podcast. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Josh. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Justin?
I'm good. Doing well. Like I said, I feel like we're on episode, like this is 173, and I've used Zoom for like 170 of them, and I still am learning what to do it. And we went through an entire pandemic and people are still like, is it on? Is it working? But
I love Zoom.
It makes it easier, I tell you that much.
I like the face-to-face too.
Yeah.
I've had some not business meetings, but I've had some meetings on Zoom where I'm so glad I was able to see the face, because when someone they can really reveal a lot that you can't tell over text or even on a phone call. So yeah, I like looking at people when I'm talking to them.
I talked to one person who didn't want their face on our recordings. So they didn't want it on YouTube or anything like that, which is like, that's fine. I have no issues with that. I do this video portion because I can. It's not necessarily the most, we get mostly listeners, but I like having this visual aspect of it. But I'm like, can we at least look at each other when we talk? And then I'll just not put your video on. And they're like, yeah, that's fine, because it's so much different not being able to see someone's face.
Absolutely. Well, you got a strong streaming game with your setup behind you. I try to have a nice vibe on mine too. So yeah, I like to just talk as well, but when you can have a video element, I say go for it. You're gonna get a lot more out of this if you can see my face when I'm talking, and the way we react to each other.
Yep.
I think that's what makes certain podcasts stand out, is when they have a visual element.
I think it's also changed. I mean, I tried a different software than Zoom at one point, and there was a delay, and it almost felt like I was talking to someone who was like, on the scene of a crime on the news, and they're trying to like talk back and forth, and they're like, so how is everything going there? And then they like wait 30 seconds. They're like, well, thanks, John. And they like, it was like that. And I was like, oh, the flow got thrown off. So I was like, oh, yeah. Zoom works so well because it's instant.
Yes.
I say something to you.
I think it was StreamYard or one of the other platforms. I had to use headphones for it, and even though you couldn't hear it in the audio, I was getting an echo in my headphones. It was the most annoying thing, because I get on a flow, like I'm doing right now. I get a little bit of a motor mouth going, and then I'm starting to hear my own motor mouth there, and then I'm forgetting the point I'm trying to make. Oh, it was a nightmare. This should be a commercial for Zoom. They should pay us. This podcast is sponsored by Zoom.
We could talk all we want, and then all of a sudden our voices in our heads are already there, and then we're also hearing more voices in our heads. It's just screwing with us all together. But yeah, exactly. Brought to you by Zoom. Here you go. The fun thing is that you're on one side of the country, I'm on the other. That's the other fun thing about this, is that we can do this. Awesome. We can sit down, have a conversation. I'm in Maine. You're in California. We're literally could be, I guess I could be in Maine. You could be in Hawaii, but like continental United States, we're as far away as possible pretty much at this point. But yeah, and we get to talk horror books, horror things, so on and so forth. But like, let's get started, Josh. I mean, how did you get into? Have you been a horror fan since a wee lad, or have you been? Did it come in later in life? How did you become a horror fan in general of the genre?
I mean, all of the above. There were different phases. I'm one of those '80s kids who walked down the VHS aisle, the horror aisle of the VHS store, and my mind was blown by artwork, cover art on films like Chud and Pumpkinhead and Fright Night. and just blew my mind. In my mind, they were so much worse than they turned out to be. They were still scary though, and I loved being scared. I loved being like too afraid to watch a movie. Like I was too scared to watch The Exorcist. I thought if I watched The Exorcist, I would become possessed. I thought it was that evil. And then, so I challenged myself to watch it, and it was a ton of fun. And then I went to college, got kind of into other things. I was into music and things like that. And then it was when in the mid aughts when Netflix had that huge when they first dominated the online streaming game, their horror library was humongous. Basically anything you could imagine. And then there were things that, had gone straight to digital that you never could have gotten in a video store back in the day. There were foreign films, New French Extremity, J horror, and Coast to Coast, and all the different flavors, South America, Mexico, and it just really just blew my mind. And so I'd watch these. I'd stay up all night on Netflix watching like Martyrs or something, and then the next day I'd be like, oh man, this film, and then this, and then it was all this cult, and they're like, a lot of my friends were like, I'll never watch these horror movies. I don't like horror movies, but I like hearing you talk about them. You should write about them. So it's a good idea. So it was back in the day when everyone had their WordPress,
Mm-hmm.
the early days of blogging, and from there I got a few jobs working freelance for some horror websites, and from there I got to Dread Central.
Mm-hmm. And then you wrote there for a while, and then
I did.
are you still writing for them?
No, no.
No, I thought so. I thought when you said you were there, I said, yeah, 2021 ish, right around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started in like 2017, and then I became the editor in chief in like 2019, and I served until 2021, almost
Mm.
exactly 2 years. And then I had a kid and just didn't want the um editor in chief lifestyle
Mm.
anymore. So from there, I switched gears, and now I'm into writing books.
There you go. And you also had your chronic horror talk show that is now sidelined, obviously during the pandemic, but
Yeah,
you had
yeah,
that too.
that was also part of the whole, Dread Central and
Yeah.
my connection with that company. And yeah, things changed with the pandemic. They basically told me straight out afterwards that their business model had changed, and they didn't want to produce content from the ground up. They wanted to just distribute pre-made
Mhm.
content. They wanted to acquire things. So, it was a bummer, but maybe it'll come back someday in some new form.
Yeah, it's funny how the pandemic changed so many bad things, but also so many like there are people who things grew out of the pandemic when there's other people whose things stopped because of the pandemic and people's business models changed and things like that. It's one of those weird things. I had a conversation with someone last week, and they were like, "Yeah, I mean, I could have." Prior to the pandemic, I could have bought in a house. And we're like, yeah, that was 4 years ago. Like
Mhm.
nowadays, we're like thinking it was just yesterday, and now we're like, no, that started 4 years ago, guy.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because this kind of not like it started in the pandemic, this podcast, but like a version of it kind of started during the pandemic because it needed something to do. And because of the, not invention, but the surge of things like Zoom. And so like as the opposite of yours, where yours kind of like fizzled out or mine kind of started. And that's where some people are, and why I'm at where I'm at now. It's
Well,
because I
Dread
was able to
Central.
take time during the pandemic to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Dread Central kind of hopped on that the best we could. We started doing these virtual reunions and conventions. Indie horror films. We'd get like the whole cast and the writer and the director back together and just talk for an hour or so. That was a lot of fun. We
Yeah.
did a couple dozen of those. We called them dissecting horror panels, and usually about a film, but we also had episodes that were about special effects or stunts or even wardrobe. I think
Mhm.
it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Again, Zoom just kind of changed the game, offered opened up a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, it's really crazy how that happened. And like I said, 173 or so episodes of this podcast, all because of the fact that I could do it virtually. I don't have to worry about it. And the big thing is too, I think that the virtual part of it, not to continue on that side of it, but like was the fact that you could show up to this podcast recording a couple minutes prior, start recording, and then when we're done, we're done. Whereas there's no
Mhm.
like commute to the studio, there's no get there 15 minutes early, have a conversation, and then you stop recording and you have a 30-minute, 40-minute conversation afterwards, and your 1 hour recording or 45-minute recording turns into a 3 hour, 4 hour endeavor. Whereas this thing is like I record every couple of weeks with a guy that lives in the town next to me, and we do it virtually still solely because of that, because of the fact that we could just start it at 10 o'clock in the morning and you stop at 11 o'clock in the morning and you guys go on your day. If not, I'd be there from like 9 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I like to talk. That's why I have a podcast. So
I like talking too. It's been great for me, as a guest. I can do 2 or 3 podcasts in a day.
Mm-hmm. It works out well that way too. But yeah, so you started writing. You're obviously writing for a while about horror, but then you have doing horror novels or novellas like this Teleportasm, which is why you're really on here to talk about. How did that come about being at the Killer VHS series at a Shortwave?
Well, the Killer VHS series is something that Shortwave founder Alan Listuvka started a couple of years ago now. There are 2 issues that are out already. The first one, Melonhead Mayhem, is a creature horror. You'll love it if you're a fan of homunculi horror along the lines of critters and gremlins and things like that, ghoulies. Mm-hmm. The second one that came out, I know you know it, Candy Cane Kills by our mutual friend, Brian McAuley. Teleportasm will be number 3. So far, the series has been dubbed the modern day Goosebumps for adults. It's definitely for adults, especially mine, which is so far the most R-rated of the series.
They are. It's funny, you're right. It's like almost like they've progressed a little bit. But yeah, when you get to yours, you don't shy away from some of the gruesome things and some of the horror that goes on in Teleportasm. That's for sure. I mean, Candy Cane Kills is a slasher, so there is this like full on in it, but it's not as gruesome as potentially as Teleportasm. That's for sure.
Right. Well, Melonhead Mayhem's creature horror. Candy Cane Kills is Christmas horror. Mine is analog body horror. One of the first horror movies that really blew my mind and scared the shit out of me was David Cronenberg's The Fly, which is like, basically one of the most famous teleportation stories in cinema, at least, both the original and David Cronenberg's brilliant remake. So my goal was to represent the Cronenbergian disgusting goopy side of technology.
And it's also great because it's in that Killer VHS. So all of these Killer VHS stories revolve around VHS tapes. A story that comes out of it's not solely like it's not solely that you are watching a VHS or you were in a VHS or something like that. They all revolve around a VHS type thing, and that becomes the nostalgic part of it, which is kind of cool because you automatically have that built into the story, the nostalgic part of it. But you did go pretty nostalgic in this book, which is pretty cool in my opinion. I love that part.
Thank you.
It's pretty cool to see that, and that's one thing you say with Melonhead and with Candy Cane Kills has it. And I love how you mentioned the Goosebumps thing because yes, it has been dubbed like a modern day adult Goosebumps because of the fact that it has that same feel but more adult. However, it also is cool because now on my shelf, my Goosebumps collection, and then the Teleportasm and Candy Cane Kills and Melonhead Mayhem are right next to it now.
Nice.
Because it's like most of my books you think on my shelf are alphabetical order by author, like a normal, not say normal person because people do color nowadays and all kinds of things. But when I had just Melonhead Mayhem, it was with where it should be with the author. Right. And then when Candy Cane Kills came out, I'm like, I can't really put 2 books of a series together yet. That was with Brian McAuley's books. And then once I got this book, I'm like, okay, now 1 through 3, they can go in the Killer VHS section. It has its own spot. And now when Cicada comes out, we'll put Cicada right next to it and we'll be all good.
Oh, yeah. Cicadas is going to be great. And then there are 2 more coming down the pike. There's going to be a Bigfoot horror, which I'm really excited about. And then a witchcraft horror coming up. So you got all kinds of different genres. It's going to be a great series. Like you said, they look fantastic together.
Yes, they do. And not to mention Candy Cane Kills 2 coming as well from Brian. He's doing a sequel to that too.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of a cool thing there. But like, so this is teleport. Why don't you tell a little people about what Teleportasm is as your little elevator pitch you would say to someone?
Sure. In 2012, 4 friends unearthed a unique VHS tape that, when viewed, causes short-distance teleportation with euphoric after effects. It feels good. It feels
Yep.
really good. It feels too good because they start getting reckless with it and making copies and people start getting stuck in walls and turned inside out and shit like that.
I love that aspect you added with the euphoric part of it too, because I feel like if there wasn't that part of it, you might just it might have dwindled out. The unsafe, if it's unsafe, people wouldn't do it as much. But because it
Right.
feels good, people have to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It added that layer that added a little more depth to the story that made it
Yeah.
so that
Thank
like
you.
there's a reason why you'd get addicted to it basically.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really proud of that twist to it. I love addiction as a metaphor and drugs as a metaphor, but then I just started thinking how funny it would be like in Star Trek after every time they transport, if they're just like, oh yeah,
I
oh fuck, that
I
felt
need I need
great.
a cigarette. Oh God.
Yeah,
That's now we need that episode. We need that
I know,
here we
right?
go. Once this book comes out, you need that South Park episode where they just
Exactly.
they do this episode but on Star Trek and do a little
Uh,
bit of teleportation on there. No, and people end up in walls, people end up in some weird spots and things like that too. And I wrote on our review on our website was that it almost it's one novella, 176 or so pages novella, so it's easy to read, and that's a big thing to me about the whole comparison to Goosebumps is that it's like a quick, easy read. This is not we love Stephen King here in Maine as a king of horror, and his books, some of his books can be an endeavor. It could be it could be a journey, and with a novella, you get this ability to just quickly read stuff. But it also felt broken up, not like that, not broken up badly, but broken up good in a good way. That it was like I got to read like it almost felt like short stories. Do you know what I mean? Like it was one big story, but it almost felt like short stories along the way too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's how the Martian Chronicles is set up, Ray Bradbury. Each chapter is kind of a little bit self-contained, but they all inform each other. So, it's not like you could read it in any order. It's not an anthology. There is the through story, a single night that takes up 4 chapters, and then that story continues across 2 or 3 more chapters. So it's a little more chronological than at first it seems, flashing back a decade and then popping, forward a few years and things like that. But yeah, that was a really fun aspect of it to have the through story, but then also be able to kind of look into the future and see the ramifications of the decisions they made that night. Imagine you're just out with your friends one night having a good time and you accidentally fuck up the entire world.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
bummer.
It would be a bummer. And I will say it also brings in that style. And this being we talked a lot of comic book creators. You always get that question when you're with some other fellow nerds of like, what superpower would you want? Would you want to fly? So on and so forth. And teleportation is obviously one of those that comes up. And this is a different. I feel like the conversation would change a little bit. Is if this is the way it would happen in teleportation. I feel like a
Right.
lot less people would be like, yeah, I want that. If you end up potentially being stuck in a wall
Yeah.
or in a tree or something like that. That might end up being more of something that's picked a little less than anything else.
Yeah, well, the point of teleportasm is that, teleportation technology is fragile,
Yep.
and if you're fucking with something you don't understand, and then you start making copies where you get, a little bit a generational decay, or you copy it onto a fucked up tape, there are just a lot of things that can go wrong. And then when you open up, something as colorful and imaginative as teleportation, it was just a lot of fun stomping around in this playground.
I just it reminds me as I was reading it and people stumbling upon a VHS tape like this. I reminded me of like when I was a child, or I should say, high school student, and I had a bootleg copy of Triple X, the movie with Vin Diesel. Don't
Right.
judge me at all for my childhood foes, but like this bootleg VHS that it had XXX on it. Triple X is the name of the movie, right?
Right.
And my mom finds it and she takes it away from me because she thought it was pornography. And I was like,
Sure.
first of all, mom, on my computer, summer photos, 1997. That's where the pornography is.
Right.
It's
Right.
not a VHS tape labeled XXX. Come on, like
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
be let's be real here. No, it's kind of funny because I could just picture her putting this VHS tape into the VHS or the VCR and then being teleported somewhere else, thinking that she found some sort of pornography, but it ends up being some sort of teleportation device, and she ends up in another spot. That would be hilarious.
We have that scenario, and that's one of the first thing that pops into your mind when you think about like an unlabeled tape, potentially in a pile of other tapes, that may or may not be pornographic, and just being like, what could this be? It might be sexy.
Hmm.
So, there's a curiosity, but it's also ominous because it might be a snuff film or
Yeah.
something that's going to traumatize you, or it could even be cursed, like in The Ring, and then you're going to get a phone call and be dead pretty soon. So, yeah, there are just so many angles to go with a VHS tape, which is the brilliance of the Killer VHS series.
It is, and what's funny is when I first heard about it, I was like, "How are they going to be able to pull this off and be Because they're all standalone. If anybody doesn't know, Melonhead Mayhem, Candy Cane Kills, Teleportasm, Cicada, so on and so forth, are all standalone books, similar to the idea, like we mentioned, Goosebumps again, to the idea that they're all, in R.L. Stine's world, but they're all individual books. Whereas this is the same way, with they're all in Alan's world in a sense, and then
Mhm.
everybody else gets their own crack at it. But
Yeah,
they're
that's a
fun
good
to
way of
read.
putting it.
You'd like them all, I think. If you read one, unless you're not into a specific type of horror, if you're not into the critters and things like that, then maybe you wouldn't want to read something like Mayhem Mayhem. But they're all. I think everybody would like every single one of them if you liked one of them, in my
It
opinion.
was really astute what you just said, because in a lot of ways, this is Alan's playground,
Yeah.
because he and I worked very close together to make sure that I was creating something that was going to fit the mood. If you loved Candy Cane Kills, you don't want to read something that's going to go in a total different direction and be totally glum and, just completely different. You want something that's going to be similar tonally. And that's what we worked together on, because yeah, it's Alan's baby. It's his brainchild, and I just feel so lucky to have gotten a chance to play in his world.
Did you have this idea like prior to being a Killer VHS horror author, or is this something that you worked on with, like you mentioned Alan, but is this something that like Alan kind of give you an idea for? Like, how long have you been working in this story in your mind?
Yeah, I came up with the idea specifically as a pitch for Killer VHS. Brian McAuley and I are both members of the Los Angeles chapter of the Horror Writers Association. We met a couple years ago, right after we each released our first novel,
Mhm.
and he was working on Killer VHS, and I was like, "Oh man, I had heard about it. I was like, I want to get in on that." And he said, "Well, pitch Alan."
Mhm.
And so I pitched Alan, and the first pitch I sent him, it was something along the lines of Hellraiser by way of the Philadelphia experiment, where the tape was going to open doorways, and but instead of it being quasi religious, it was going to all sort of trace back to teleportation experiments conducted by the government. But yeah,
Uh,
and then it evolved into what is now teleportasm.
that's so cool because I know there's other like in the comic book world, there's some publishers who nowadays like come up with an entire story or a plot, and they say they hire a writer to flesh out that plot and to write that plot into a book. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that idea. But in the same sense, I also like the idea that each one of these authors in these VHS series books are coming up with their own ideas, and that's
Mhm.
pretty cool in that sense too. Yeah.
Well,
But
I'm
yeah, it's still
definitely,
like I said, it's still Alan's playground though. We've already
yeah.
mentioned that.
Well, it's still me in the sense that the two novels I wrote before this are body horror novels
Yeah.
with fringe elements of sci-fi and you know um, things that meander into the fantastic. So it's still me. It's what I would love to bring to this series, and working with Alan was just making sure I got the nailed the tone, and that I was really like part of that world, and I couldn't be happier. It was more collaborative than my other book projects, and I just loved it. And it was such a fun concept and idea that we were kind of making changes up to the last minute. There are entire chapters of Teleportasm that we just took out and set aside, not because they weren't great. They were fully edited, they were really good, but they weren't as good as some of the other chapters. And yeah, it's in keeping with the 30,000 word count, which is kind of
Yeah.
the goal for, as you said, a single sitting, something you can just devour really quickly. But they're teleportasm stories that are still out there, so maybe we can release a follow-up in a magazine or something, and expand on the world a little bit more.
Well, it's kind of funny is I don't think they ever planned, and I haven't talked to really. I talked to Brian McAuley a little bit about Candy Cane Kills 2, but I don't think there was ever really a plan originally for Alan to do a sequel in this
Sure.
series. It was just going to be individual. So, like, if this obviously sells a ton of books. There's a
Yeah.
possibility where he's like, "Hey, Joshua, you want to come write some
Oh,
more?"
if he comes knocking, absolutely. Like I said, we have ideas that were either taken out or not fully fleshed out of the first one. So I could go back into that world, now that you have a long view, I could fill people in on some things that happened without having to worry about spoilers, and then I can talk about what happens next.
Mm.
You know, one thing that's great about Goosebumps is the way each book, even though I think only one or two of them has a sequel, each book kind of like ends on a cliffhanger, and that's what I did in Teleportasm, where, I kind of like, dun dun dun, it's actually just the beginning of something even scarier, and then just leave the reader's imagination, to run wild with itself. I don't know where I was
I
going with this,
no,
man.
I could just picture at the end of the book actually writing "dun dun dun" in actual words. It's like
That's
I'm
how it
gonna
is.
put that there.
At the
Yeah,
end, I say dun
there you
dun
go. Dun, 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 big
dun.
letters. It's like
Yeah.
what is it? Netflix has that "tadum" is the
Uh-huh.
actually written out as
Uh-huh.
something. It would be like the same thing. Dun dun dun, and then there you go. But no, it's your other two books around the same length.
No, my other two books are definitely novels. I mean, I think if you
Okay.
Google like how long is a novel, they'll say
Yeah.
40,000 words or longer, and they're both between 40 and 50,000
Okay.
words.
Okay. Yeah. I couldn't remember. I was gonna look it up, but I just didn't have it off the top of my head. But yeah. And so like was it more of an exercise to do 30,000 words, or was it was it easier? Not easier, but it wasn't a breeze, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, here's the crazy thing. I wrote 100,000 words to get to these 30,000 words.
Okay.
So, there you go. Was it easier or harder? I don't know. It was just so enjoyable. That's all I can say. It was supremely enjoyable.
And actually, I think it's you probably would interview anybody from this Killer VHS series. I think they're all saying the same thing. I think they're all
Yeah.
saying that it was enjoyable, that it's a fun exercise in writing, and it's a fun thing to do. And all of us horror fans, like I said, there's I just finished The Devil by Name by Keith Rosen, whatever, and it is phenomenally. It's amazing. It's so good, but it's a lot because there's a lot in it, and it's a lot going on. There's a lot. It's a violent book. It's a book that's like just and just like I said, you just have to sit there in your own thoughts for a second. Whereas, like
Yeah.
I said, that this is Teleportasm is written wonderfully, and it's like I say a breeze because it sounds like it's just you're writing for simpletons here, but no, it's a simple story in the sense that it's a novella, and that's to me is a huge thing, and I think that's what's cool about shortwave in general is
Mhm.
the fact that like they're just focusing on shorter, concise stories that make sense, that are really good, but that aren't this like I said, this whole like 480, 500, 600 page journey, which is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
Alan's got a great vision for not just Killer VHS, but for his entire company. And he's definitely made a name for himself in a short amount of time. And I'm just so thrilled to be on the roster.
Mhm.
I'm so thrilled to have had this opportunity to work with Alan. I mean, if tons of you guys out there buy and love Teleportasm, I have a feeling he'd come back and say, "Hey, Josh, what can we do next?" But that's on you guys. That's on you guys. But
And I want to put that out when you said purchase it. I would love to say is that you can get it from a bunch of different bookstores and things, but like buying it from Shortwave Direct is a really cool idea because they send it to you in this box that has like obviously some vintage feels to it for sure. It looks like a VHS box in a sense, and you put it in there. It comes with the cool thing also, it comes with a membership card,
there you go.
like you're going to rent your own
Individually
VHS
numbered.
there you go. And you have yours, right? You have it somewhere because they give the authors the first, like they save the first whatever number of
I
them when you
have
have got
mine.
early.
I didn't look at the exact number. I think you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think Alan wrote that a little while ago about the idea that they have like the first 15 or 20 cards they saved. I'm guessing Alan has number one,
Nice.
but like other than that, it's like number two, number three, number four, either saved for those people in the early writing. So you have
Yeah,
an early
that's it. Yeah,
number of
it
it.
wouldn't
But
surprise me at
um
all. That's exactly something Alan would do.
and like I said, and then just the quality of the book itself is great. The
Mark
feel of
Volchik.
it,
Mark
it
Volchik is the amazing artist.
yeah.
He did, this wonderful cover along with Melonhead Mayhem and Candy Cane Kills.
Mhm.
Um, well known in his industry. Obviously, he does incredible work. I love how this looks like it's under a black light, even though it's not. It has a real wonderful color palette. And I got to tell you, when the covers started coming together, I actually changed the color palette of the novel to reflect that in some edits. I went back and gave it this kind of like black light sort of purple smoke and strobing lights sort of feel to it to kind of reflect the cover.
Oh yeah, and the cover's great, and I'm a by trade by day I'm a graphic designer, so seeing the text treatment like that too is pretty awesome too. It kind of gives
Yeah,
that coming out of the TV kind of feel,
right.
like a TV blipping a little bit kind of feel.
Like you're
Uh,
melting.
yes,
Something crazy is about to happen.
and it's something is crazy is about to happen. I'll tell you that much. But I used to not. First, two things. I used to not be into horror at all. Like horror was one of those ones you mentioned off the top about someone not being into it. You can. I like hearing about it, but I don't want to watch it. And it was a number of years ago where I just said, you know what, I should start watching these movies. I work closely with some people for some comic conventions, and they were getting some like Cain Hodder was coming in and all these different things, and I'm like, oh, I've never seen Friday the 13th, so I don't really care. And then I was like, I should probably start watching these things. And then I was hooked. I was like, okay, all I want to watch is horror now. My wife was like, I'm scared for you now. Like all you want to watch is horror. And
Horror's so big now that it's not like it was before. It's crazy when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't like horror movies." I watched a horror movie and I hated it. You watched a horror movie? It's so big. You can find horror movies that don't have jump scares and slashers, and it's still gonna be an awesome cinematic experience.
and I feel like horror as a genre, it's like the same thing we deal with a lot of this superhero genre. I feel like the superhero genre has so many subgenres to it. Like Marvel has like an Ant-Man movie, which is like a heist movie, and then you
Mhm.
have other movies that are funny movies and comedies and so on. And horror is the same thing. I think horror is an overarching genre, but there's so many subgenres to it, and there could be ones that are just like, wow, is that really a horror movie? I guess it was a horror movie. And then there's ones that are like, that's a horror movie. And I
Right.
think that there's such a mixture that I feel like I'm not sitting there watching a Halloween over and over and over and over again.
Exactly.
I'm watching a
Exactly.
variety of different horror movies. It's the same thing now, getting into more reading horror novels and novellas and things. There's just so many different versions of what horror can be. And then I also wasn't into reading. Like I read comics and that's about it. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago where I'm like, I guess I should sit down and read a few novels.
Yeah,
I
I've
guess I
been
should do
getting
that.
into I've been having a
So
reading renaissance myself. I was so thoroughly immersed in cinema for
mm,
Dread Central, and before that, when we were talking about am I a horror guy and my love for horror, where all that came from. But yeah, it's great getting back into reading books and that immersive world and having it be my own internal cinematographer. It's a lot of fun and it informs and enhances my own writing.
and the crossover between reading more into horror has been such an amazing thing. And I read books now also as having a, uh, you know, background of the way I started out reading horror or having horror in my life has been cinema and seeing when reading a book being like, oh my God, I would love to see this as a movie.
Me
Like,
too.
I'm sure you would too, but I'm just saying, like, I definitely think I could see this in something with the VHS series, all of them just scream that because of the fact that it's a visual plot, like the idea behind the VHS tape is
I think
already
they'd
visual.
all make great movies. I think someone in Hollywood should be knocking on some doors and making some proposals, making some offers.
Yeah, see, there you go. But or even like mini series in a sense, like those one like the 3 episode mini series of some sort, where like it's a Killer
Yeah.
VHS series, or each book has 3 episodes or something like that in it. Would work too. But like, there's something about wanting to see this and already seeing it in my head. I think there's some books where I'm like, that's probably going to be made into a movie just because it's famous. But
Mhm.
then there's some books where I visually start seeing in my mind what this would look like on a screen. And I think that you did extremely good job in this book writing things to make me visualize them. And that
Thank
made me
you.
go, oh, I want to see this on the screen. But then I'd be pissed because whoever would take it on wouldn't do it justice.
I mean, it probably wouldn't be as good as in your head, but
Yes.
you could do a lot. And one of the fun things I did with Teleportasm, I did really flex my muscles in terms of describing these gruesome body horror events. But I also initially, at least, I left a lot up to the imagination. You have this scene where it's a couple of nurses just kind of like decompressing over coffee after work, and it was a fun way for me to tell a really gruesome story because I wasn't this omniscient narrator kind of like blandly recording it like on a court reporter machine. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. It could be kind of like people explaining to each other and having the emotional responses. That was a lot of fun.
And not have, and having people be like, you can't be right. It's not true. That's a tale. That's a tall tale. And having me to be like, no, this is really what happened. This is what's really
Right,
going on with
right,
this person. This person's teleported. They're stuck. They died because there's a piece of plywood in their head or something like that.
right.
But yeah, and then the special effects to it would look amazing
I think
in
so
that
too.
sense of it. And I would want practical effects, obviously, as the vintage, as the nostalgic part of it. You'd want more practical effects on
You could
something
do a
like that.
lot though with some subtle CGI, because the people who teleport sometimes change dramatically, sometimes change subtly. The more you teleport, the more pronounced these uncanny, unnerving changes may become. So there's a lot of room for some good CGI. But yeah, and with teleporting, the actual what would it look like to just kind of like go up in a puff of purple smoke, and then you know pop up somewhere else in the same sort of state. There's a lot of fun, a lot of room for digital manipulation there in a way that I think it would actually work and benefit. But yeah, there's some body horror scenes there, where I really would want people to like see the viscera, the goop dripping, and you can't see
Yes.
that.
And I would also want a really orgasmic sounding reaction, like a really, really over the top, like this is too much, but this is oh my gosh, and someone be like, "Can we watch that again now?"
Yeah. Well,
Something
that's
where
how
like
some
you're
people
watching it in the
react.
other room, and someone else in your house is like, "What are you watching?" That's what I want.
Exactly, exactly.
I was telling a CJ lead about me. I listened to Mayfly on audiobook, and I was talking to her, and I was like, I listened to audiobook, and it was almost too loud in my car, and I was at an intersection on an upward hill in my city, and I was at a stoplight, and I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, I guarantee you, someone can hear this in the car next to me because of how loud it is, and it
Hmm.
was some of the more more gruesome, but also more just over the top scenes she has written into that book. And I'm like, this person next to me is like, what the hell is this guy listening to? And so you
Totally.
don't get that with a book. It's all in your mind. You're reading it. No one
Right,
can hear what
right.
you're reading. But I'm like, an audiobook is like, it's you can hear it. And I'm just thinking to myself, there's a couple of scenes. If anybody's read Mayfly, there's a couple of scenes in that book that are pretty graphic, and that was one of them. And I was just like, she's like, oh my god, I can imagine like cruising the strip, someone's listening to music or whatever. I have the windows down listening to Mayfly. Yeah, that's an experience for sure. But yeah, will they do this? I know Candy King Kills ended up on an audiobook, but do you know if there's any plans for having audiobooks of any of the other ones? Or
I'm not sure.
okay.
That's Alan's wheelhouse.
Mhm.
My first two books have audiobooks. Deeper Than Hell has an
Mhm.
audiobook that's out now, and my follow-up, Septum, the audiobook is currently just being polished up and will be released shortly.
To me,
If
I'm
you
a,
like
I'm a hybrid.
fascinating.
I mean, this is easy because I think to me it's like one of those things that again, 176, 180 pages is an easy read. But I also like for something that's a little bit longer, a hybrid reader. So a lot of times I'll read it in the car on an audiobook, and then I'll like before I go to bed, I'll pull the actual book out, find out where I was, read the book,
Oh, that's
just because I
cool.
can get more books in and
Yeah,
finish
that's a
more
great way to
things.
do it.
And so it's nice to have that. But again, this is one of those ones that you literally could just like on a Saturday curl up on the couch and just
Hopefully,
read it and
yeah,
not have
knock
to
it
worry
out.
about it. It's one of those things. But yeah. And so are you planning, you have more books? Like, are you looking to write more? I'm guessing this is not like not in this Killer
Yeah.
VHS part, but like just in general, are you writing something currently? Not that you have to say it, but I'm saying, are you currently writing? Are you thinking of things? What's going on?
Well, I've got another novelization. I wrote a novelization for the film Forbidden Zone, that cult film from the 80s. And I have another novelization coming out this November of Circus of the Dead. It's more recent than Forbidden Zone. It's about 10 years old. It's a very violent clown movie, has a huge cult following out in Texas. I don't have an agent or anything. Hopefully, if Teleportasm's successful or if there's an agent listening, I have about three manuscripts. One is almost ready to be published. The other two need a little work, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to sign my next contract and get my next work out there. So yeah, hit me up if you're on the if you want to scoop me up and
Yeah.
Attach yourself to the Joshua Millican company.
Company, the train's rolling. You want to get
Hop on the
moving,
train.
hop on the train. Yeah, and I do think that's one of those things that Brian McAuley and I forget who's the first person, who did
Alex
villain. Alex,
Evanstein.
yes, Epstein. Those two and you had similar voices, which was nice in the sense that it has to be in for these things, but you also had your own unique, vibe to it as well, so which is good. One of those things that you set yourself apart, but
Mhm.
also it was within the same vein, so people wouldn't be like completely shocked going from one to two or three. They're not like, this is a completely different novel, I don't want this anymore. But no, like you
Totally.
mentioned before, Alan did keep it. It's a train that's going, and it's had multiple books on it, and they all
Right.
sound at least similar, but you have your own stamp on it, which is cool.
Exactly.
So that, so I wouldn't be surprised if someone wants to pick up something else from you, Josh, for sure. That's I would read it. I'll tell you that much. I'm gonna be now that I've read these ones and I have some time, I'm gonna be diving into your other books as well.
Yeah, get Deeper
So
Than
yeah,
Hell and the audiobook.
yes,
Encyclopocalypse is a great up and coming brand. They started
yeah,
as a niche novelizations company, but they do fiction, original fiction as well. And yeah, they released two of my books. I'm going to release a second novelization with them this year, and I just love those guys to death as well.
that's awesome. I'm pumped for that. So yeah, I mean, so it's out technically when this episode, we're recording the day before it comes out, but it's actually releasing the day after it comes out. So you can grab Teleportasm. Again, I would highly recommend, buying it directly from Shortwave, because you get this, like I said, the audio, this membership card, and you get the box that it comes in. It also has a list of all the other stuff. I got a coupon for 15% off my next order too. Look at that.
Nice.
See, there you go. And it actually has Alex's Melonhead Mayhem book on there
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I gotta
Great artwork.
cover up my QR code there so no one steals my 15% off. No. I go to use it, and it's like, it's already been used. What the hell? And they have all kinds of other cool stuff over there at Shortwave too. I know Clay McLeod has a book coming out, and
A
there's
great guy.
yeah, they have some other stuff that's coming out too, which is pretty cool, that are not part of the Killer VHS series. There's still those novellas
It's
there
still going
too.
to be a great Killer VHS year because, Teleportasm comes out tomorrow, and then you have two more in
Mhm.
2024. So yeah, it's a great time to find out if you love this series. Because if you read Teleportasm, you immediately have two more to read that you can order right now, and then you have three more to look forward to in the coming 18 months.
I'm so excited because Alan sent me last week or the week before that Cicada
Mhm.
digital, so I can read that one too. So that's on my list to get going to, and it's
And you got to you should have
Tanya Pell. Yeah.
Tanya Pell on the
Yep.
show. You should get you've had Brian. You should get
It,
Alex, and
yes.
have a whole Killer VHS playlist
We'll have
for
like a
people to
series that you
come.
can go along with
Yeah,
it. Read the book,
yeah.
listen to the episode, and it's one of those things I like talking, because I like the little insight on things, and I like to talk to about what's going on in the book. But it's like one of those things I don't want to spoil it either. So like that's why
We
we
can
don't talk a
spoil
lot
away.
about.
We can spoil away. I tell you, as a writer, I worked on this for like, almost a year and a half, and the only one I talked about it with was Alan, and
Yeah.
now that I'm allowed to talk about it, I love talking about it. It's like the dam burst, and like I'll gush on it. So whatever you
So I
want
feel
to
like
talk
what we should
about.
do is, we should plan as a an episode. There's like three or four of you on writers from it, where we all just spoil it, and it's a spoiler episode. But with
It'd be a
this
lot
being
of
like,
fun.
with the idea that this literally comes out right when the book comes out,
Uh-huh.
I want people to listen to this and then go, oh, I should go pick the book up, instead of
We
being
can
like, oh, I just heard
tease.
about the book.
We can tease aspects of the book.
The teasing of it is,
Mm.
yeah, don't get too excited by teleporting, because you might end up in a wall, or in a tree, or something, and you might
But
scare the
it
shit out of your parents, or
feels so good. You're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna risk it.
I think that's my favorite part about it. It sounds so weird, but like I think the favorite part about it is that it's euphoric, that there is this extra special feeling to doing it. It's not just teleporting, because I feel like most teleportations, including or things that bad body manipulation things, are painful,
Mhm.
and actually doing it. Whereas like this book, it's not painful doing it really. It's euphoric doing it. It's painful potentially with the outcome at the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like where
yeah.
you end up teleporting to could be painful, but the
Right,
actual
right.
feeling of teleporting doesn't seem like it's painful. Am I correct about that? That's where the euphoric part of it
Exactly.
comes in.
Teleportasm is actually a word that I made up for the effect of teleporting. It's, the state of euphoria and excited delirium that follows a teleportation event. And it's unlike anything you've ever felt, but it doesn't last forever. Therein the problem.
Is that the when you're done in bed and you're laying next to your partner, you're like, oh, why did I do that? No, that's
No,
the
no,
feeling. That's
you're
the
like, are you asleep yet?
yeah.
Let's do it again.
I want to teleport again. I want to do it again and again and again. And the
Right.
fact that it involves a VHS tape is just even more cool. And the funny thing is, it's like my son's 3, right? And so by the
Mhm.
time he's old enough for me to be like, you should read Teleportasm, he's gonna be like, what the fuck is a VHS tape?
Right. They're going to be in the Smithsonian.
That's the best part to me. It's like, at least, nowadays, like probably people, there are like some people that I know that are just more like they never held one. There are people
Right.
like that haven't held one or haven't had a VHS player or VCR in their house and so on. But there's going to be a point where it's more along the lines of like if I mentioned to someone in high school about a laser disc. I mean, I can't see it over here, but this over here is a Five Goes West laser
Nice.
disc. And when I showed some people the laser disc, they're like, what the fuck is a laser disc? I'm like, this is how
Yeah.
you used to watch movies, or they tried to make it so you could watch movies. I remember in school, they had like the teachers would bring in like basically it was like a documentary on a laser disc and they'd stick it in the laser disc player. And it's like got one little scratch on that thing. You couldn't watch it.
Right.
It
Right.
had like the Titanic was on like 6 of them because it
Yeah.
held
They're
almost
these
no time.
huge, thick DVD looking things. Yeah. They're wild.
That's Philip Glasser who voiced Fievel. Signed that for me
Nice.
at a local convention here, and it was funny when I walked up there. I go, "Is this the first time?" And he goes, "Actually, no. Someone actually has also brought me a Five Goes West laser disc." I'm like, "God damn it! I wanted to be the only one with one of these things, but no." And VHS tapes mean a lot to me
Yeah.
because I grew up on VHS tapes. I'm guessing you did too, being an '80s kid
Yeah.
as well. And so that's why if you see behind me, a lot of times if I go to a convention, we give a couple in Maine that I work closely with, and when I go to a convention, a lot of times I bring a VHS if they've been in a VHS related thing and have them sign that. Because to me, it's like that I'm never going to likely play these things ever again. But
Hmm.
there's something so, I don't know, less meaningful behind like a DVD than there is for some
Yeah.
reason about a VHS, and I
They're
have a
just
buddy of
so
mine.
historic. They're just
See,
so
yes,
historic. And the smell of the cardboard specific too. It almost has
yes.
like a stale bread smell to it. There's
Where's
just
my,
something really special about
here it is.
these little suckers.
My buddy Bob Tackett, give him a shout out there. He's an artist or a comic book artist from Maine, but he does these things, which is pretty cool. He does our illustrations
Nice.
on VHS. And so every time I see him at a convention or something like that, I have him do a new one. So this is my copy of Stephen King's It. And I also have Jurassic Park. He did one for Jurassic Park, and I have over here a Spawn one for the Spawn TV show that he did Spawn drawing on. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's my also other collected thing is like this VHS thing. So I have a stack of them where I'm like, I kind of want Bob to do an illustration on these. So yeah, VHS tapes. There's nothing more nostalgic to me being an '80s kid than a VHS tape, in my opinion, and that's what's cool about this series. One of the
Yeah,
cool things about this series.
it's another part of Alan's genius,
Mhm.
is creating a collectible experience that really harkens back to the VHS experience.
So you like level on top of each other goosebumps love, horror love, and nostalgic VHS love, and you hit like such a great Venn diagram for a bunch of people born in the '80s,
Yeah, yeah.
and potentially even into the '90s and things like that. It's awesome with these things, and then you throw over there something about orgasmic teleportation is even
Right.
better than that. So, but yeah, it comes out June 25th, which is obviously
Mhm.
yesterday when this episode drops. So check that out. You can get it on Kindle too if you want a digital copy. But come on, people, you want this physical copy? Like
You can get both.
seriously.
You can get it on
Yeah,
Kindle, but
exactly. See,
you want that box,
you
man.
want the box, you want the physical copy, you want this. This is gonna be the next Goosebumps, guys. I tell you this right now. 30 years from now, people are gonna be like, "Do you have a first edition Killer VHS?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and I've got the membership card to go with it. So
Mhm.
it's
Thank
also gonna
you.
be used as a bookmark, right? And there you go,
Yeah,
bookmark.
of course.
But yeah, check that out, and then check out Brian's other. Or it's Brian's. I said Brian. I was just thinking about Brian McAuley. Check out Joshua's other books as well online, and check out all your stuff. I can't wait to read more from you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on and chat horror and books and all kinds of things. We'll have you back on when you write another book. Sound good?
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.